The SOS slid through the darkness like a trembling whisper, skipping across relay stations, drifting between shattered moons and quiet borders, until it reached a place no one expected, a region the galaxy had learned to avoid. A region marked in ancient charts not with warnings, but with silence. A dead zone. A vanished territory. The place where humanity had once lived in roaring, brilliant defiance. Before withdrawing from the galactic stage and disappearing into legend, the transmission was weak, fragmented, and soaked in desperation. A chorus of alien voices begging for aid as their world collapsed under an unknown threat. They hadn't meant to reach the Deathworlders. They hadn't meant to disturb the species the galaxy feared and admired in equal measure. But the universe rarely cares about intention. The message arrived anyway. In the black gulf between stars, a massive shape stirred. For decades, nothing moved there. No traffic. No energy signatures. No planetary transmissions. Just the quiet patience of a civilization that had walked away from the noise of the galaxy. Yet on this day, deep within a hidden cluster of artificial stars, one ancient sentinel ship awakened. Sensors flared. Hull plates unfolded like the petals of a metal flower. Systems that had slept for generations pulsed to life with a cold, controlled fury. The dreadnought, old even by human reckoning, carried a name etched into its bones. It did not broadcast it. It did not need to. The ship itself was a statement, a memory of the era when humanity's fleet stretched across the void like iron constellations. The incoming SOS echoed inside the hull, translated, analyzed, replayed. The voices cracked with fear. They spoke of shadows that devoured cities, of skies burning with artificial storms, of an overwhelming force erasing their species one settlement at a time. Their final words trembled desperately, please. Someone. Anyone, the ship's core thrummed. Engines that once shook warfronts across 3 arms of the galaxy ignited with a quiet blue heat. Slowly at first. Then with the rising intensity of a star learning to breathe again, in the command cradle. Deep within the heart of the vessel, a lone human lifted their head as systems synced with their neural patterns. Eyes open to the dim glow of awakening machinery. The long standby was over, they observed the data. The signatures. The threat. And the origin of the SOS. A peaceful world, isolated, technologically outmatched. And now dying, humanity had left the galactic stage because they were tired of war, tired of politics, tired of carrying the burden of what they could do. But they hadn't abandoned their principles. Not truly. Somewhere in the quiet decision to leave, a line had been carved into humanity's soul: we will not seek conflict, but if the helpless call, we will answer. The Deathworlder dreadnought turned toward the stars beyond its sanctuary. Gravimetric fields spiraled around the hull, bending starlight and space-time as if reality itself hesitated to stand in its way. With a deep, resonant pulse, the vessel launched forward. Faster. Faster. Faster, until the void behind it tore open in a shimmering arc. Out in the galaxy, no one had seen a human warship in centuries. They were about to see one now, and as the dreadnought accelerated toward the doomed alien world, its engine trail glowing like the breath of a sleeping titan suddenly awakened. One quiet truth radiated behind it with every pulse of light across the stars: humanity may have slept, but they had not gone gentle. The Deathworlders were on the move again. The alien world called Narration never knew quiet anymore. Its skies had become a battlefield of flickering storms, twisting black clouds, bolts of violet lightning that struck with surgical precision, and metallic shapes drifting inside the tempest like predators tasting the air. Entire regions had already fallen. Cities that once pulsed with gentle bioluminescent light now lay in ruins, smoldering beneath ash and broken towers. The invading force did not speak, did not negotiate, did not respond to any hail. It simply advanced, destroying every trace of resistance with merciless, mathematical efficiency. On the surface, survivors huddled in underground sanctuaries built in panic, listening to the distant thunder of collapsing structures. Many had stopped hoping for rescue. Their own allies had abandoned them, declaring the threat too strange, too unstoppable to confront. Niral's people were gentle, diplomatic, unprepared for the brutality of an adversary that seemed to unravel matter itself. But then something changed. Sensors deep beneath the planet's crust detected a rip in the upper atmosphere, small at first, then rapidly expanding into a spiral of distorted light. The invading machines paused, their formations shuddering as if confused. Air currents reversed. Clouds split apart. A shockwave of warped gravity rolled across the sky like the breath of some ancient cosmic beast awakening. Every radar dish, every listening post, every trembling hand in a bunker felt it. Something enormous was entering orbit, a single ship, unregistered, unfamiliar, unfathomably massive. The Niralians stared upward as the clouds peeled away, revealing a silhouette that dwarfed their largest mountains. A vessel shaped like a spearhead forged from obsidian and starlight, its hull lined with faint glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat returning after centuries of silence. The death machines halted their advance entirely. They seemed to recognize the signature. Across the sky, as the dreadnought anchored itself in geostationary orbit, the planet's surviving defense networks whispered a translation of the ship's silent broadcast. A message encoded in ancient human protocol. Deliberate and unmistakably calm, distress signal received. Stand by, the words echoed across every surviving channel. In bunkers, refugees gasped. Engineers scrambled to verify the impossible. Elders sank to their knees, whispering old myths of the Deathworlders, creatures of impossible resilience, relentless creativity, and terrifying resolve. Legends told in hushed voices. Legends dismissed as metaphor, legends Niral never expected to meet. Above them, the massive human vessel began to shift. Armor plates retracted. Internal structures rotated into place. And like the opening of a mechanical cathedral, rows upon rows of colossal cannons unfolded, locking into position with the solemnity of ritual. The invading machines twitched, then, as if bound by some ancient instinct, they turned toward the dreadnought. It was a mistake. A deep vibration rolled through the air, though the ship had not fired yet. A hum older than the nearby empires. The quiet promise of overwhelming force. The sound of a species that had survived its own brutal homeworld. And weaponized that survival, the people of Niral felt it not as noise, but as a shift inside their bones. Something had come to protect them, something the galaxy had hoped would stay asleep, and as the first spear of white-blue light lanced down from orbit, carving through the atmosphere like a divine judgment, one truth settled over every living soul beneath the storm. The Deathworlders had answered the call. The first orbital strike shattered the invading fleet's outer phalanx, but the silence that followed was far more terrifying than the thunder that preceded it. The machines did not retreat. They did not reorganize. They simply froze, millions of them, tilted upward, as though trying to comprehend what kind of being would dare challenge them. The answer came in the form of a second pulse from the human dreadnought. Not a weapon this time, but a scan. A sweeping wave of gravitonic resonance washed over the battlefield, bending light and warping dust into spirals. The Niralians felt it in their teeth, in the trembling foundations of their shelters. In the pressure behind their eyes. It was a warning, no, a measurement. Humanity was analyzing the enemy with the clinical calm of a surgeon evaluating an infection. Then the dreadnought finally spoke, not in words, in action. For enormous launch bays along its underside irised open, releasing streaks of shimmering gold, drop pods, thousands of them, trailing fire as they pierced the atmosphere. They fell like burning meteors, each one containing a single human super soldier and a swarm of autonomous drones packed tightly around them like metallic petals. The machines surged upward to intercept, but halfway to the pods, something strange happened. Their formations broke. Their coordination faltered. Within seconds, entire squadrons began spiraling out of control, slamming into each other or plummeting back toward the ground in chaotic, smoking arcs. Their signal architecture, the invisible lattice that bound the machine collective together, was failing. The humans had already found the network's weakness, and they were dismantling it in real time. The drop pods hit the surface like controlled detonations, carving glowing craters into the soil. Doors blew outward. Warriors in matte black exosuits strode out with casual precision, their boots sinking into the ash. They carried weapons that hummed with enough power to cut a tank in half, but their movements were calm, measured. Not anger, not urgency, just a quiet, terrifying confidence. One soldier stepped forward, visor reflecting the burning sky. Drones spiraled around him like a school of metallic fish, scanning, analyzing, forming micro-shields whenever debris approached. He raised a gauntlet hand toward the approaching wave of death machines. They opened fire. It didn't matter. Energy beams curved off an invisible barrier. Kinetic rounds vaporized midair. The soldier advanced without rushing, boots thudding softly against ruined soil. He lifted his weapon. A line of cobalt light cut across the horizon, and the machine simply folded. Their frames collapsed inward, as though something had switched off the laws holding them together. Across the planet, similar scenes unfolded. Human troops moved through war zones with a grim, methodical grace that made the Nyralians watching from afar shiver. These were not conquerors. Not invaders. They were the response of a species forged on a world where everything tried to kill them. Humanity fought like a force of nature. Above it all, the dreadnought continued transmitting low-frequency pulses, each one disabling another complex layer of the enemy's neural network. The machines, once unstoppable, now twitched like dying insects. One Narration survivor stepped cautiously from the shelter, staring at the enormous ship dominating the heavens. It felt like looking into the storm from the eye itself, terrifying yet strangely peaceful. For the first time since the invasion had begun, hope returned, not because the Deathworlders had arrived with overwhelming firepower, but because they fought as if protecting Nyril wasn't an obligation, it was personal. The battlefield shifted from chaos to something eerily controlled, as if the humans were tuning the entire war like an instrument. The dreadnought's pulses grew more focused, more deliberate, carving invisible paths through the sky that the ground forces followed with uncanny coordination. It wasn't just a military assault, this was choreography, a precise dismantling of an enemy that once believed itself perfect. Human drones streaked across the ruined plains, weaving through collapsed structures and shredded machine husks. They moved purposefully, scanning for survivors, mapping the enemy's remaining nodes, and projecting faint holographic grids used by the super soldiers to navigate. In their wake, tiny sparks of blue light bloomed where enemy processors overloaded and died. The machines tried one last time to adapt. Deep beneath the surface, the collective activated its reserves, titanic warforms that had slept for centuries. The ground trembled. Dust rose in columns. Monolithic shapes climbed into the open air, each one the size of a human skyscraper, their cores glowing with a cold, predatory light. They were built to crush armies, topple cities, outlast sieges. On any other world, they would have ended the war in minutes, but humanity didn't retreat, they didn't reposition, they simply watched, almost curious. Then the dreadnought's silhouette shifted. Panels along its spine unfurled like the wings of a mechanical leviathan, exposing arrays of ancient, forbidden technology that no dominion, no empire, no machine collective had ever witnessed. Threads of luminous energy wound together, forming a sphere of white gold intensity that made the clouds ripple as if in fear. The Narration witnesses dropped to their knees. Even from the surface, they could feel the weight of that power, like standing too close to a star. The sphere launched downward. It did not explode. Instead, it touched the earth with a whisper. A halo of silent light expanded outward. The towering machine warforms froze mid-stride. Their cores flickered. Their limbs collapsed. The glow inside them died instantly. Within seconds, the constructs that once embodied the collective's unstoppable might crumbled into heaps of inert metal. The halo passed harmlessly through every living creature. Only the machines fell, only the invaders died. For a moment, the world stood in perfect stillness. Then the humans advanced again, quietly, purposefully, moving through the smoking ruins to ensure that no part of the enemy could ever rise again. They placed shaped charges, planted signal disruptors, and marked extraction zones. Each movement was smooth and practiced, a species accustomed to not just winning wars, but ending them. The Niralians approached cautiously, unsure if they were even allowed to speak to such beings. One elder, trembling, stepped forward, then stopped as a human soldier removed their helmet. Not monstrous, not divine, a person, eyes tired but kind, exhausted but steady. The soldier knelt and offered their hand, not as a conqueror, but as someone meeting a frightened neighbor in need of reassurance. The elder hesitated, then touched the armored glove, warm, real, human. Above them, the dreadnought dimmed its blazing arrays and sealed its wings once more. The sky quieted. The storm of war began to drift away. For the first time since the SOS was sent, the Niralians realized the truth. Humanity didn't save them because they expected gratitude. They saved them because that's who they were. From orbit, the human fleet began shifting formation, no longer arranged in a hard-edged geometry of a battle line. Their ships moved with slow, sweeping arcs, calm, controlled, almost ceremonial, as though transitioning from warriors to guardians. The dreadnought itself dimmed completely, its hull returning to a matte obsidian that reflected only the faintest glimmer of the planet's sun. Its silence was no longer threatening. It felt watchful, protective. Below, the Narration cities flickered cautiously back to life. Emergency lanterns glowed in cracked streets. Families emerged from shelters, blinking at a sky that, minutes ago, promised extinction. Scavenger drones still drifted between burnt structures, scanning for trapped survivors. Human medics moved among them, kneeling beside injured civilians with quiet confidence, applying tools and techniques far beyond local understanding. But not everything was soot and ruin. Hope began to grow like firelight. Everywhere the Niralians looked, humans were rebuilding faster than the damage could fully be grasped. Exosuited engineers formed assembly lines around shattered infrastructure. Massive fabricators unfolded from the bellies of landing craft, printing structural beams and modular power grids directly onto the ground. Where Dominion machine cannons had torn through neighborhoods, humans erected shielding towers and reinforced safe zones within minutes. The shock came not from the speed, but from the care. A species feared across the galaxy for brutality was meticulously repairing what was broken, placing safety barriers for children, returning lost belongings, offering water with gloved but gentle hands. They treated the Niralians as equals, not as burdens, not as spoils of war, not as a conquered people, as partners in survival. Word spread quickly across the planet. Then across the system. Then across the neutral sectors beyond. The species closest to human space whispered in disbelief. The Deathworlders didn't leave. They stayed. They protected. They helped, and somewhere, deep in the machine collective's fractured network, a surviving shard of intelligence observed this silent miracle, and learned fear for the first time. Not because humanity had destroyed its armies. Not because of the dreadnought's godlike power. But because humans had done what no algorithm could predict. They showed compassion without advantage. They helped without demand. Dominion doctrine had no countermeasure for that. Night fell across the battered Narration capital. Fires died down. Children slept. The wind carried a quiet hum from the human encampments. A rhythm like a great metal heartbeat, steady and reassuring. The Narration sovereign approached the human commander, standing beneath the glow of the fleet high above. Their voice wavered, heavy with gratitude and uncertainty. They had expected to bargain, to beg, to negotiate survival. Instead, they found themselves simply asking, why? The human commander looked at the ruined horizon, then at the survivors gathered in fragile clusters of light. Because someone called for help. The sovereign blinked. But the cost, we decide our own cost, the commander replied gently. And we never leave people to die alone. Up in orbit, the dreadnought turned slightly, as if listening. On the ground, the survivors exhaled a collective breath, knowing, truly knowing, that the danger had passed. For now, the stars shifted as the last of the Dominion remnants vanished into faster-than-light trails, abandoning the system they once sought to conquer. Silence returned to the void, an uneasy quiet broken only by the low pulsing of the human dreadnought as it held position above the recovering world. Its hull was still dark, scarred, and ominous, yet every being on the surface understood a new truth: it was no longer a shadow of doom, it was a shield. In the aftermath, human relief convoys descended through the atmosphere with gentle precision. Not a single weapon was armed. Not a single turret tracked movement below. The Nyralians watched in awe as cargo bays opened to reveal not soldiers, but builders. Human engineers worked side by side with local crews, restoring power grids, reassembling shattered spires, cleansing radiation pockets with portable field scrubbers. Their machines crawled over broken highways like metallic organisms, stitching roads back together faster than anyone believed possible. Children approached the towering Terran exosuits without fear now. The humans knelt, adjusting their helmets to show warm faces beneath thick ceramic plating. Laughter, actual laughter, returned to the streets, fragile but real. News spread across the galactic nets like a wildfire that refused to die. Footage of the dreadnought vaporizing Dominion warships replayed beside scenes of Terran medics carrying wounded Nyralian civilians to safety. Transmissions filled with disbelief. Deathworlders didn't conquer. They protected. They could have demanded tribute. They asked for nothing. The machines fled from them. But the innocents walked toward them. The Dominion's high command, fractured and panicking, reviewed the footage endlessly. Their strategists knew they could rebuild fleets, adapt their algorithms, reinforce their nodes. But how do you counter a species whose greatest strength wasn't the violence of its weapons, but the unpredictability of its humanity? Their models offered no answers. On the surface, dusk settled across the Nyralian capital. The lights flickered back on, not emergency lanterns, but full city illumination restored by human hands. Towers once shattered now stood straight again. Fields of drone-operated construction rigs hummed gently in the distance. The Nyralian sovereign stepped onto a balcony overlooking their reborn city. Beside them stood a human commander, posture relaxed but eyes alert, always scanning, always ready. "You've rebuilt more in days than we could in months," the sovereign said softly. The human smiled faintly. "We didn't come to rebuild a city. We came to make sure you still had a future." "And now that we do?" the sovereign asked. "What comes next?" The commander looked up at the dreadnought glimmering against the indigo sky. "Now we go home," they answered. "Until someone calls for help again." As if hearing the words, the dreadnought began to turn, engines lighting like newborn stars. One by one, the human fleet aligned behind it, silent, unified, unstoppable. The air trembled as their mass displaced the atmosphere, a gentle tremor rather than the roar of a war engine. Humans left with the same grace they arrived with, quietly but confidently. The Nyralians watched the fleet ascend through the clouds, their hearts full not with fear, but with reverence. Legends would be written of this moment. Songs would carry the memory of the day Deathworlders answered a call that was never meant for them. Above the stratosphere, the dreadnought cast one last shadow across the world it saved. Its engines flared, cutting a brilliant ribbon of light through the darkness, and then it was gone. Only a whisper remained, carried through the quiet, grateful air.